You are listening to Revealing Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into getting over your fear of taking risk in real estate and making money while you sleep. I'm Nick Oppedisano, your host and real estate guru with over 20 years of experience. It's time to get real. Welcome back to Revealing Real Estate, the podcast where we break down the latest market trends, investing strategies, and big picture moves shaping the real estate market today. Today, we're tackling the biggest cross-border real estate debates, Toronto versus Florida. Toronto, a major financial hub, historically stable, but facing affordability challenges. Florida, a low-tax, high-growth market that attracts investors and retirees. But is it losing its appeal? That's the big question. And now, with Trump back in office, tariffs and economic policies are shifting again. What does that mean for Canadian snowbirds, investors, and Florida real estate? To help us break this all down, we have Andrew Moresi from North to South Realty. Andrew is a licensed agent in both Toronto and Florida, helping investors and the homeowners navigate the challenges of cross-border real estate. But before we dive into today's topic, Andrew, let's talk about your journey in real estate. Tell us what made you get into Florida? What was it like, and what made you want to decide to start selling in real estate in Florida?
Absolutely, Nick. Thank you very much for having me on. This was, this is one of the podcasts that I really wanted to be on, and I appreciate you inviting me. You guys do a great job.
Thank you.
Very, very nice and beautiful office. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I've been in the real estate industry in Ontario specifically for 15 years, took over my father's business, and everything was going really, really well. A few years ago, I was approached by some friends of mine who opened up a company and wanted to start relocating a little portion of their business down to Florida. A lot of Canadian investors, we noticed there was a huge market specifically in the state of Florida that was untapped for a lot of agents, specifically in Ontario. Mm-hmm. So we decided to make the switch. We invested some money into immigration and all that, and now we're able to capitalize on a lot of those Canadian investors specifically, and a lot of locals too, because we have a lot of local Floridians working for us as well down in the States. So we've been able to tap into that market, and now we've become that connection where Canadians always want to feel comfortable and they want to deal with Canadians. So we wanted to bridge that gap, and now we've become that cross-border connection where you could literally purchase a property down in Florida. You can walk into our office at Vaughan, and it's a seamless transaction similar to buying in Toronto. So we wanted to create that symmetry and that comfort for Canadians specifically, because we found a lot of realtors down in Florida, very different mentality, very different mindset. We go in there with our mindset, with our big city mentality, and we basically are dominating the market. And that's kind of where our thought process was. And now 2.5 years later, we're doing really, really well. We got about 12 agents licensed down in the state of Florida, and we are growing. We just opened up an office on the west coast in Naples, and things are really starting to snowball now, which is great. So
you right now, you have your brokerage here in Toronto, you have a brokerage in Florida, you're doing cross-border real estate right now, and if somebody wanted to sell one of their investments now in Florida, you'll be able to manage that aspect for them?
Yeah, we take care of everything from A to Z. It's basically similar to them calling you to list a property down here in Vaughan. They would do the same thing for us in Florida, right? And literally they'll deal with someone from my office here or someone from my office in Florida. Either way, we do have a lot of duly licensed agents in Ontario and in Florida that can do the transaction. So we just try to make that as comfortable of a process as possible. But yeah, literally people can sell their property without even getting into the state, or purchase a property without even getting into the state by simply just calling us, and we can take care of the rest.
I'm sure that there's a lot of real estate agents right now that want to know what the biggest difference is between working as an agent in Canada versus the U.S. Can you explain that a little bit?
So the main issue, especially coming from a big city like Toronto, people are going to find that people do not answer the phones in Florida. It's a very island-style mentality.
Really?
Yeah. It's like everybody's laid back, relaxed.
At 5 o'clock, it's happy hour.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. So Florida's not laid back too as well.
Yeah, it's sometimes agents don't call you back for a week, 10 days. Like you'll get the agents from some of the big cities like New York, Chicago, Boston, California, and those ones will, they're on it. They'll call you back right away, and some of the local Floridians as well. But a lot of the agents, they got this island mentality. They hit a certain quota in their commissions or in their income, and they're kind of done for the rest of the year. So that's been a big major hurdle. But once you get over that hurdle, I think there's a ton of money and a ton of opportunity in the state of Florida, which is another reason why I didn't
population wise, right? You can 10x your money pretty fast over there.
28.5 million people, I believe, is in the state of Florida, and Ontario's Canada is almost 40. So just kind of the comparison there is crazy, and the majority of people are in South Florida. So that's kind of where we specialize, South and Southwest Florida. So there's a lot of opportunity down in Florida. There's a lot of realtors. Florida, actually, Miami is the biggest market for real estate agents. Over 80,000 realtors licensed in Miami. Toreb is second to that. So,
and population-wise, in comparison to Toronto, between Miami, like Toronto,
Miami's got about 4.5 million, 5 million people just in Miami.
Just in Miami alone.
Not including Broward. So you go South Florida is probably a population of about, I want to say, around 8.5, 9 million people.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's some really good background. And I think a lot of agents dream to expand in these different markets, but few actually do it successfully. And it's hard to pick up and uproot yourself to once you've grown up in Toronto, establish yourself here, and then to make that shift now to go into Florida and start selling there. What's your travel like between the two? It must be intense.
So we try to, me specifically, when I go down there, I try to stay for months at a time. I don't, come back every week or something. So like the last time I was there for 4.5 months, and then flew back in early January. And I got a business partner as well, Joseph. He kind of goes back and forth as we need to. But I also have agents that are permanently residing in the state that we have working for us. So for me, it's been more, the hardest part has been more establishing the company and getting it started. And now that we're kind of at that 2.5-3 year mark, we're really starting to reap the rewards of it. And that's kind of where we're at. So I don't necessarily need to be back and forth as much. But my business, and specifically a lot of my clientele, has been transitioning down to Florida. And a lot of people want that personal touch. So I will be in Florida a lot more probably than I will be in Toronto.
Very nice. So right now I'm going to pick your brain. And I'm sure there's a lot of people interested to understand, that the changing buyer behaviors to cross-border investment strategies. So let's start with the surprising shift in the market right now. Canadian snowbirds right now are starting to ditch Florida. That's what we're hearing quite often. And over 1 million Canadian snowbirds typically travel to the U.S. Annually, and that's a big number to attain. And many are now reconsidering their trips due to Trump's aggressive approach towards Canada. With so many snowbirds now considering their trips, what's causing this shift and what's happening in the Florida market?
Absolutely. So I think there's a little bit of a correlation too, because it's a timing thing. And I think the tariffs have a small effect, but I don't think it's the major effect why a lot of Canadians are actually selling off properties in Florida. This started way before Trump. So a few years ago, there was a Surfside collapse in Miami. Condominium building was left basically neglected, and it ended up collapsing. Few people died.
Was it occupied?
It was occupied. Yeah, people were living in there, and there was I think 8 or 9 people died in it. I'm not exactly sure of the figure. So what ended up happening was that condo collapse basically changed Governor Ron DeSantis's legislation on how to start managing properties and how to start managing condominiums.
Right.
So in Toronto, we're used to walking into a condo, getting the status certificate, reading the status certificate and saying, okay, there's $1 million in the reserve. This is the condominium maintenance fees and all that stuff. In Florida, there was zero legislation. So what you've had for the last 40 years.
Not much red tape there. Right?
No red tape, zero. So what you had basically is 40, 50-year-old buildings with zero reserves, zero maintenance budgets, and they were keeping the HOA fees. You have buildings built in the early 70s that their HOA fees are $185 a month.
Wow.
So, and you got a 1,500 square foot unit. So what ended up happening now, as of 2025, and 2026 is actually the official year where every single condominium needs to now be in reserve. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we're noticing a lot of condominiums reassess. And what's happening is you have these older condominium units that are built in the early 70s or late 60s, whatever, reassessing owners at $25,000, $50,000, some of them $100,000 per unit, because now they need to redo the roof, the windows, the structure. You need to have structural assessments done. There's a 40-year and a 50-year assessment, and every 10 years after that, the building needs to be assessed by a structural engineer. You need to have quality control studies. They need to make sure that the foundation and everything is in good shape. So now you're getting a lot of reassessments down in Florida. And now when you do purchase a unit, the first question that a lot of agents ask is, Are the assessments paid? What are the assessments? Any pending assessments? Is there a reserve? And a lot of these buildings are just funding the reserves. So you have all these Canadians who bought these units for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 saying, why am I going to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in an assessment? Let me just sell my condo. So you have an influx in inventory, specifically under the $250,000 price point. That's kind of where. So there is a huge amount of inventory that came on, but this was pre-tariff. So I don't think the tariffs have anything to do with it. I think it's just a talking point right now in the media.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I think the Florida real estate market's at, and that's where the inventory is. It's if you look at condos over 700,000-800,000, there's not as much inventory as the condos that are under 250,000.
Right. A Fort Lauderdale real estate agent I was speaking with recently said that there's about 35 listings. If there's about 35 listings on the market right now, which I'm sure there's more than that. He says 30 are Canadian, and this is specifically in Fort Lauderdale. He specializes in Fort Lauderdale. 30 of them are Canadian owned, and there are 0 Canadian buyers right now. So not many people are right now buying in the Florida market. Have you seen this trend in the market yourself?
Yeah, so the Canadian buyers have stalled more so again now because of the Canadian currency. So we're at an all-time low for Canadian currency. So any Canadian looking to invest in Florida is paying 40% higher than what the sticker price is, just because of they're losing the money on the currency conversion. Now, we do have partners that work with us to give you a premier rate in terms of currency exchange. But even then, even if you get a 4 or 5 point reduction, it's still a significant amount of money. So on a $100,000 deposit, for let's say you're buying a condo, $500,000 condo, and you got to put your 20% down. That $100,000 US deposit is $140,000 to $150,000 Canadian. So it's a significant blow for the Canadians. So they're looking at it as more of a, what's my return if I'm losing 40 to 50% on my money right off the hop. So that's where I think we're seeing a stall in the Canadian buyers. There's still a ton of Canadian buyers looking. We specialize in Canadian buyers specifically. Like we have a lot of out-of-state buyers as well from New York and some of the bigger states. But the Canadian buyers, they're still looking, and they're looking for that opportunity, which right now is probably the best time for the next year and a half, that you're going to be able to find an opportunity to get a condo at a pretty good price because of the assessments and because of the overall climate of South Florida.
So all these and I'm hearing some of these condominiums are getting reassessed about $100,000 per unit, which is going to be significant changes. And now maintenance fees, of course, are going to start rising because they want to start building a reserve fund. A lot of the snowbirds, are I'm speaking with right now that are wanting to sell or wanting to take that money and reinvesting it into places like Cuba, or the Dominican Republic, or anywhere in the Caribbean, for that matter, just because I think there's a little bit more upside. The weather's going to be a little bit guaranteed, and we can see that the rental markets may be a little bit better in those areas as well, because I know in the Florida real estate market, there's not a lot of Airbnb opportunities that I've come across or I've seen. I know that myself personally have looked at moving my money into the Caribbean because there's a lot of less restriction on taxes.
Yep.
And Airbnb is highly promoted there, and it's becoming, very lucrative. Can you give us some insight on the Airbnb market and the difference between why a lot of these snowbirds right now are looking more towards investing outside of Florida?
Yeah, so specifically our experience with the short-term rental market is a lot of, especially Canadians, okay? They have this notion where they're going to buy a condo for $200,000, $225,000 US, and then they're going to be able to Airbnb it out. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The lowest price point that we've been looking at in terms of Airbnb properties are between $350,000 and $400,000, and then you can get into single family homes at that price. We were looking at one for $420,000 in Lantana, which is just south of Lake Worth. Yeah. And there's opportunities in that market, right? But a lot of
I know I'm Palm Beach. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out, but even in West Palm Beach, I went down there with a few buddies. We went on a golfing trip. We rented out the whole house, so it was highly promoted there. So these single freehold homes actually become a lot more lucrative on the Airbnb side.
Absolutely. Yeah. The single family homes is probably where you're going to make your money.
On the single family homes,
condominiums, unless you're getting into a condo hotel, which they have certain restrictions in terms of financing and everything like that. Yep. I think there's not as much opportunity, but they're a lot more expensive, and the management fees are very expensive. So Canadians specifically, think that for $250,000 they're going to get a really good performing 10, 12, 15% Airbnb property. It's not going to happen. You need to spend about $400,000 to $450,000, and then you're going to hit your 10 to 12% ROI, right? So the numbers are a little bit different. So it's just more of educating the consumer on what to buy. The Airbnb market is very strong in specific locations. So it's very, very important to deal with somebody that understands that and that understands what the occupancy rates are. That's very, very important, because even if you're running a 60, 65% occupancy rate, you're still making really good money. And then you have an opportunity to use the property for your personal gain as well.
Yeah. And what are you seeing right now in regards to the rental market in Florida?
The rental market, it's saturated slightly, but the rental prices seem to be increasing slightly. I think they're up 1 or 2%, nothing too crazy. But specifically in areas like downtown Miami, Brickell, and the major city centers, there's a huge rental market. And you got to remember, there's a ton of people migrating down to South Florida. So and when I talk about South Florida, I'm basically talking about like from West Palm Beach all the way down to the Keys. And you've got a ton of people from New York, from Chicago, from the major cities, a lot of people from California, even surprisingly, even from Texas that we're hearing, migrating down to Florida for job opportunities, because a ton of these Fortune 500 businesses are relocating their head offices down to South Florida. You have Citadel that's just moving their head office to Miami. Same thing with Amazon. So there's a lot of these major companies that they're bringing thousands and thousands of jobs down to the city of Florida, and they're bringing in tenants, they're bringing in purchasers. So the market is very, very strong, specifically the rental market. Again, it's property specific. So if you're looking in Brickell, if you're looking in downtown Miami, you're dealing with properties that are less than 20 years old. Whereas when you're dealing with the Canadian Snowbirds, the Fort Lauderdale by the Sea, Pompano Beach, you're dealing with properties that are built in the 70s. So it's a very different rental market compared to Miami or even downtown Fort Lauderdale, Las Olas, those areas.
Can you explain, if I'm a Canadian, I buy a place in Florida, I've held it for about 5 years, I've made about $200,000 in profits on it. Now I decide I want to liquidate it, move my cash out. What's the tax implications that I would have to face? Am I paying an American tax? Am I paying a Canadian tax? Am I paying both taxes?
Yep.
How does it work? Can you explain it to our listeners?
Yeah. So basically, it's like similar to Canada. They have capital gains taxes and all that kind of stuff. In the United States, there's so many tax loopholes and tax write-offs that you're able to do, which is very different than Canada and Ontario specifically. Specifically, even the tax rates are very, very low. So if you're a Canadian and you have to write your American taxes, you have to push your American taxes. So whatever your tax bracket is for that year, the highest tax bracket in the state of Florida is 37%.
The highest
tax bracket.
And the lowest?
And the lowest is 0.
So unbelievable.
Yeah. So it's very different.
Man, we're getting dinged over here.
You know what I mean? Oh yeah, like it's disgusting, right?
It's disgusting, sure, and that's why a lot of people right now over here in Toronto are getting frustrated, and all over Canada.
Absolutely, and that's why we're still seeing Canadians investing in Florida, because even with the 35-40% loss in currency, they're saving that in taxes. So the amount of money that people are saving in taxes is
Good point.
Unbelievable, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, and that's where we did this in terms of shifting our real estate business and trying to bring our business down to South Florida and Southwest Florida, is because of the taxes. And just in tax savings alone, like the highest tax bracket is 37%, the highest capital gains tax is 30%. It's actually 37% on income if you hold the property for less than a year. So if let's say you buy a property, it's gone up $100,000 within a year, you would pay whatever your income tax bracket is for that year. That's your capital gains tax. So you'd pay that on your property. But you could write off property, you can write off mortgage insurance, you can write off property taxes, you can write off HOA and condominium fees, you can write off real estate commissions. There's all kinds of write-offs that in Canada you don't have. Like you can't write off your mortgage interest in some properties, even for primary residence. And for primary residence, if you have a home there, you can write off your property taxes.
Well, I believe mortgage interest you're allowed to write off over here.
If as an investor, but not as a primary residence.
Not as a primary residence. So you're saying as a primary residence, they can write off their interest on their mortgage.
You could even write off the interest and the property taxes. And then there's up to a 10% reduction for like a home office. Like for realtors, for instance, they have a home office, they write off a percentage of what that office is for their home. In Florida, you can write off 10% of your taxes for home office.
That's a great benefit. In regards to the savings now that you're gonna implement on that, and the amount of taxes that we pay over here in Toronto, there's a big shift. There's a big divide between one country versus the next country. And over there in Florida, at least you're giving me an ocean. You're giving me the sunlight. I'm not dealing with it being gray and gloomy all the time, right? And it's our winters are very long, and they beat us up. so I can understand that, hey, you know what, if you're giving me all that, and I'm okay to still pay, be in that 47% tax bracket here in Canada, but now our governments want to increase our capital gains tax to 67.7%. I think there's some there's no real balance in regards to the overtaxation Canadians pay through it all, and it's becoming a lot difficult for people today to really get by, and with the cost of goods going on, and now with these new tariffs that are getting threatened here within the country, and things becoming so expensive to live, especially with our real estate being so high for first-time home buyers, people are getting frustrated about it, and we're seeing a lot of people wanting to move their money out of country because of these issues that we're facing. And I think things really need to change over here, and it's understanding what benefits you get from different countries, specifically the United States as our biggest allies and our neighbors, and we're seeing a lot of this shift right now within the market itself. We saw major supply chain disruptions affecting sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing. The last time tariffs were enacted in 2018, and that's now when Trump was in power, I believe. And now that he's back in office, tariffs on Canadian imports, including lumber and steel, are now back on the table as well. And we're seeing that within the news quite often. And there's a big disruption, and he's disrupting a lot of things right now currently throughout the world, and not just here with its biggest trading partner. And Florida has a booming construction market, as we all know, with higher material costs due to tariffs. Could we see a slowdown in new developments there in Florida, and could this lead to more housing shortages as well?
I think Florida is very different than Ontario specifically in terms of housing. There is an abundance of inventory in the state of Florida for housing and a lot of new construction properties. There's also an abundance of people moving there, so it kind of balances itself out. But I don't think you're going to ever have a supply chain issue right now unless things get really, really significant and severe because of the amount of inventory that there is in Florida. So whether you want to buy a single family home that's less than 5 years old, there's options for you. It's not like in Toronto where the market was extremely low. We were seeing under 10,000 units of inventory, and each house was getting 15, 20, 25 offers. Down in Florida, there's options, right? Developers too, when they're buying phases and selling off phases, they're releasing inventory homes, because then in the way the construction field works in Florida, it's very different. It's not just because you don't sell a house doesn't mean you can't release it. You still have to release the home. So that's why there's a ton of inventory homes, and there's a lot of opportunities in Florida. So I don't think you're going to see a supply chain issue as much in Florida as you would in terms of inventory as you would in Toronto or the GTA, right? Because of just the way it's built. It's a very, very different market.
Plus they got a huge population.
That's right.
versus Canada in a whole. I think the state of Florida,
almost 30 million people.
Almost 30 million people there, right? So, you pretty easy to 10x your money there in Florida versus being here in Toronto. There's such a bigger broadband market. And I think that's why the cost of real estate, even on a cost per square foot, if you look at the Florida market, being on the ocean right now, you're going to pay significantly a lot cheaper than you would, a condo here in Toronto, and specifically in Vaughan, you're at $800 a foot. But I'm hearing, certain areas of the city, like Yorkville, you're going to be hitting closer to $2,000 a foot. And it's becoming quite expensive in retrospect because of the population there, and the lack of inventory that once was. You were still seeing price points at a relatively more affordable price point. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're looking at new development by specific developers down in Florida, like the W Hotel in Pompano Beach. They're at about $1,300 a foot, but it's a W Hotel, and you're in Pompano Beach and right on the ocean. You have private beach access. And that's $1,300 a foot US, so that's about $1,700 Canadian. But what's the alternative in Canada to that? There's nothing really remotely close. Where are you going to go to the Bisha Hotel?
They got an ocean, guys. They got an ocean. They got sunlight. They got their climate is, it's all year long. Over here, you got a swimming pool. Every year, you're bringing in your furniture. You're wrapping it all up. Yep. You got to restart that winter season or prepare to winterize everything again. And all of a sudden, you're here for a short summer. Come April, you're opening up your pools, all that stuff. Over there, you don't have those issues. You don't have those problems, right? Yeah. And it's just a cycle that just keeps turning every single day, and makes things a little bit more comfortable. I think specifically a lot of our listeners want to really talk about the taxes and cross-border investing and beyond the tariffs, there are so many major tax implications that investors need to be, aware of. And we talked and we had some insights on that. But what are capital gains taxes, and how do they compare between Toronto and Florida? I know you answered that a little bit, but I just want to really kind of emphasize and talk about that specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were saying, so the Canadian government just imposed a potentially new, they rolled it back, but a potentially new capital gains tax was 67.5%.
67.7%.
Yeah.
So people, just so our viewers understand, it's not 67% on the full profits on it, right? So the way I like to break it down, the easier way to do the math on it is, if somebody's made $100,000, you're getting taxed on 50% of those profits. So you're 67.7%, and I believe it's been on hold now. They put a hold on it right now, but you would be taxed on the $50,000, not the full $100,000.
Exactly. So Florida is very different. There's different capital gains rates. So it depends. Like if you're within a year, like I was explaining to you before, your capital gains rate is whatever your tax rate is. So if your tax rate's 17%, your capital gains rate is going to be 17% as well on that property. Now, if you've held the property for over a year, the highest capital gains tax is 20%. So, like I said,
But is that on the whole amount of profits, or is it broken down to 50%?
Just the profit, whatever the profits are. I don't know the exact percentage.
So on $100,000, you're
$20,000.
$20,000.
That's now you
versus
write off.
Here in Canada, that $100,000 you're getting taxed. So 50%, let's say even at the current state of that would be 50% of that would be about $25,000.
That's right.
Yep.
The difference is, and this is probably the same in terms of write-offs. You can write off your property taxes, your HOAs, your real estate commissions, your fees, and all that kind of stuff. They give you a lot more incentives, and there's a lot more write-offs than what I just mentioned. So, for instance, if in the Canadian tax code, if there's 15 or 20 acceptable write-offs for capital gains tax, in Florida there's like 50. That's
right.
The main difference. There's a lot more stuff that you can write off. And there's also what a lot of people don't know and don't understand is there's a 1031 exchange. So you can actually flip the profits of your new property into a like kind exchange. So if you have a single family home, as long as as a duplex and you have two tenants in there, as long as you buy something of like kind, and it depends on what the government considers like kind, but generally it's kind of similar type of home where you're using it as an investment property. Let's say you bought this property, let's just use an easy number, $1 million. You sell it for 1.2 million, you would essentially have to pay the capital gains on the 200,000. You could roll that in as long as you buy a property of equal or more value. So if you buy a property for 1.2 million or more, there's zero capital gains. You roll that into your new property, and then once you sell that property, the 1031 exchange, you have 180 days to close from the time you close that property to close on your new property. And then you have 35. There's a few different scenarios which we can always discuss a little bit later.
Yep.
But generally speaking, the 1031 exchange relieves you of paying capital gains as long as you buy a like-kind property.
Wow, and that's a huge difference here, because over here in Canada, if I sell one of my investment properties and I've got a good return on that property, and we'll just talk for conversation purposes, we'll say $100,000, and I got to pay taxes automatically once I sell that property. I can't take those profits and roll them in to another investment property, which, in retrospect, I do believe with the state of Florida's laws on that, and I do believe that is a big bonus for investors to get investors back within the market here, because we lost investors here in Toronto because they don't trust our governments. They don't trust, what's going on right now. There's so much fear and volatility within our markets, and it's been like that for the past 4 or 5 years, where you have all these markets just fluctuating too rapidly up and down. And I'm noticing there's a lot of people here taking major losses on it, and investors right now are in the red on majority of their investments. So they're losing a lot of their money. Now, when you go and sell these things and you finally get these things to become very profitable, well, yes, if I took out that money and I took that cash off the table and I wanted to use it just because I wanted some cash in the bank and, go and spend it, that's fine. Tax me on that money. But if I was going to take that opportunity and take that profits and roll it into another property that I want to keep as an investment, down line road, it makes you want to keep reinvesting and circling that money within the market itself. And that's a huge difference I'm noticing between the two different styles of laws that are implemented.
And that's where I'm noticing too, even my clientele. So I'll give you an example. If we look at the industrial commercial side of things, which is a little bit different than the residential, I have clients calling me, they have 30, 40, 50,000 square foot warehousing here where they're doing countertops, they're doing kitchens, they're doing whatever they're doing, right? You can name it, they're doing it, right? They're actually, a lot of them are relocating or adding a secondary location in Florida, because here you're buying, let's look at it in this typical industrial building, you're looking at about 500 a foot here, and anywhere in the GTA, whether you're in Brampton, Mississauga, Toronto, between 450 to 550, 600 a foot.
That's more of the bigger buildings, freehold for sure.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, but you want to buy a 30, 40, 50,000 square foot building, you need $30 million, right? That same building in anywhere in South Florida would run you, okay, if you're in Miami, you're looking at between 10, $15 million. But if you go a little bit on the outskirts, you go about an hour and a half north of Miami, you're buying a 50,000 square foot building for under $7 million. So there's a lot of these companies where they see the opportunity, and not only that, they're opening themselves up to a market that is so much larger than what they are. That's so much larger that they're currently in. Like just Florida alone, 30 million people. But it's not even that. It's the avenues that Florida opens up. Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, all the surrounding states. And then you can have different pinpoints. You can even open up in the West Coast. There's so much. You open up yourself to a market.
Such a broadband market, yeah.
That's 10x Canadians.
Yes.
The Canadian market, right?
Yeah.
So,
And then you're earning American dollars too, by the way.
and then
right?
there you go. So that's 40% on your money right off the hop.
Off the hop. Yeah.
So it's like, there's so many different, there's nothing wrong with Canada and Toronto and everything
Of course,
other than.
no, the opportunities are there too as well, and
right.
I think there's so much growth over here. I think we got so much land that we still got to develop on, and I think the Toronto market will come back, and I think it's going to flourish, and things will become more expensive because of the amount of immigration and the amount of people that want to move in. Basically, because of employment, because of our healthcare system, which is going to be is a big fundamental reason, because of our schooling system, and it's a safe country to live in, right? Our climates are not the best, our weather's not the best, and our taxations are through the roof right now. And I think that's where Canadians really want to change. Excuse me. I want to step up to the plate to, get just be able to save a little bit more. And that's why Canadians are very frustrated right now, because with all these taxations, there's really no more savings left over. Because if we look at the average household income, you're probably anywhere between 120 to 130,000 combined income gross.
Sad.
You put that in net, that you're making $80,000 a year. If you're 60% of that money is going towards your mortgage, now you're only left with 60 on 80. You're left with $40,000. It doesn't get you by much after car payments, insurance, and all that stuff. How much is a household really saving?
Exactly.
And how is now somebody within our markets right now who just wants to get in, they're in newlywed, first-time home buyers, for them to save and to buy at the way things are going right now, it's going to take them up till they're 50 years old to even put down a down payment on a house.
Exactly.
So the system is broken right now, and I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to need to be changed. As you can see with these new tariffs in place, you can see a lot of rising costs that are going to start being pushed more, or pushing more people to move to the U.S. I believe, and it will take Florida. It will make Florida more attractive due to these rising costs, I believe. But do you see the same thing? Is your opinion based on that?
Yeah. So like even the tariffs, I think as much as polarizing figure Trump is, I think he knows what he's doing. I don't think he's as stupid as people think he is, and I think he's doing this on purpose to show that disparity between Canada and the U.S. and to show these Canadian businesses to say, why are you operating in Canada when you're paying X amount of dollars? You could be operating in Missouri, you could be operating in Ohio. Correct. For a quarter of those costs. So I think this has something to do with that. Again, I could be completely wrong, but in the end, the disparity is huge, and I just noticed it on a Canadian perspective. Being a Canadian, being born here, moving to Florida and living the Florida lifestyle, how much different the lifestyle is down there in terms of your taxes, groceries, lifestyle. Everything is so different, right? It's not for everybody, granted.
But I think the big thing is lifestyle, right? You're getting a much better lifestyle, I feel.
The lifestyle is there, even grocery shopping, just the average grocery. I'll give everybody an example. I was in Costco here when I first landed in January. I got a 6-pack of chicken breast from Costco. It was $37. I go to Costco near my house in Florida. I got a 12-pack of chicken breast for $24, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same chicken breast, like same farm,
brand,
same everything.
yeah.
Same brand, same everything. So it's like, yes, you factor in the exchange rate and stuff. Some things are more expensive, some things are cheaper, but in the overall, the disparity is huge. And then once you start factoring in your income taxes, it makes a huge difference. Then you'll get all the Canadians that really don't know what they're talking about. They're going to throw in the two variables that everybody throws in on Florida: hurricanes and healthcare. But when you're saving on average $25,000 a year on your taxes, and you got to pay $7,000 in health insurance, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. Now, for the people who are on the lower end of the totem pole, yes, it's a little bit more expensive and they don't have access to the certain care. But you can get a Cleveland Clinic membership for like $4,000 a year. You know what I mean? And it's you're going to get the best healthcare. You're not going to have to wait 9 hours in emergency. They're going to literally give you white glove service. You're going to get doctors that do ultrasounds and x-rays. You're not going to have
immediately
to wait.
in Africa. Exactly. You're going to run through it at a lot more time efficient manner.
Exactly. So it's like you look. I have cousins in the States, and they came to the hospital here, and they're like, "This is a third world country." I have agents who just came back from countries like Thailand who said, I can't believe the healthcare system in Thailand is 10x better than Canada.
Yep.
Like, that's the sad part. And it's like, where are we going as a country? Where are we going as the highest tax nation? If you look at any graph of North America, the 3 top tax brackets, Quebec number 1, Ontario number 2, BC number 3. I think New York is 5th or 4th on the list. And then you go all the way.
I think California is pretty high up there too.
California's higher. I think California actually might be higher than New York.
I think California's higher than New York. I think they're at 43.
Yeah. So they're still.
But at least they got an ocean.
They got an ocean.
Right.
Exactly.
They got sunlight out here. It's such a better climate. It's minus what just happened recently in California. If you think about it, what are you really giving us over here?
Exactly.
And you're charging us all these taxes for what?
Exactly.
Our healthcare system's completely broken. Doctors want to leave the country. And I'm going on this because I just recently lost my dad.
Yeah.
And I believe we could have had more time with him here on Earth. And I do believe the system failed us because he was in an emergency sitting there for 5 days before they were able to get him a hospital bed. They were supposed to do certain procedures on him, but it took so long to even get him those procedures on him, and he was just deteriorating at the point. And I was talking to one my son plays hockey, doctors on there, and me and him were just having a candid conversation. And we were talking about, the issues of why doctors don't want to stay here within this country. And I know we're shifting gears here, becoming a little bit more political on it. But, a lot of this is part and so true to what's happening within our economy. Is this doctor was making $1.5 million a year, head surgeon at one of the major hospitals that we know of. $1.5 million a year. He says that his T4 tax sheet showed that his tax bracket was $798,000 that he had to pay back within taxes too as well. So over 50% of his income was actually put back in taxes. Where's the incentive for somebody to want to work a little harder here? Where's the incentive for these small businesses to want to continue to grow their businesses? Where's the incentive for employees to want to spend more time overtime to work and start making more money? There is no incentive. What's happening here right now is becoming very socialist, where you want to just tax people that are successful, you know what I mean, and reward the ones that don't want to go out there and work hard to do what they need to do. This was the land of opportunity. When I was younger, I was very patriotic. I used to love my country.
Yep.
I don't feel the same way today. And I think that's where the biggest shift needs to happen. And I think that's why people are looking to change locations and move themselves within this country. And I think there's a bigger uproar with these conversations. A lot of conversations I'm having with people right now, they are very frustrated.
Absolutely.
They are very frustrated. And those are some big issues that we're seeing within the markets for sure.
Absolutely.
Given the current economic times and the political landscape, do you think Florida is a good investment right now for people to really consider?
I think we kind of nailed it in the beginning and throughout the podcast. It's the disparity between Florida and Toronto is huge, right? So I do think there's a lot of long-term potential, specifically down in South Florida. The reason being is you're going to see a lot of big money flocking out of the major states, and unfortunately a lot of the Democratic states, because of the taxes, because of the climate, the red tape, and everything.
And they're complaining at a much lower time. They're still complaining. They're getting taxed more.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So why not move your business like Citadel did from Chicago down to Miami with thousands of employees, because you're saving that 20 points on your taxes on $1 billion corporation. That's a lot of money that they're saving, right? So you're going to see Miami, and Miami's already the bridge to Latin America and South America and Central America. But you're going to start to see Miami become, I think, the financial hub of the United States. Maybe not in the next 5 or 10 years, but past that, if there's no major changes in New York. Mm-hmm. This is just my opinion, but from what I'm seeing is that's what I'm looking at. Okay. I think you can't go wrong in Miami.
All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Yep.
If you don't mind, I'm going to just put you in the little hot seat right now. So we'll get right into it right now. So Toronto or Florida, if you could only invest in one, what would you pick?
Florida.
Buy and hold versus fix and flipping. What's the better strategy?
Depending on location, but I think buy and hold, you can't go wrong. There's not as many opportunities in the fix and flips.
Which Florida city is completely overhyped for real estate right now?
Overhyped?
Overhyped.
City? Brickell.
Brickell?
Yeah.
Okay. What is one piece of advice you would give to new real estate investors?
Make sure you hire the right people that represent your interests.
If you had to sell your property today and start over, what would be your first move? Oof. If you had to look at this all at the beginning, Andrew, starting
as
out,
of today?
Yeah, how long have you been licensed right now?
15 years.
15 years. If you had to start all over today, would you do things differently?
Yeah, I just have migrated my business to Florida as of today.
As of today. Nice. All right, so that's a wrap. I think on today's episode of Real Estate, we tackled everything from Trump's tariffs, Canadian snowbirds ditching Florida, tax strategies, and investment risk. If you're thinking about investing into Florida or Toronto, hit up Andrew Moresi. He's located in our same plaza where the OP team is at 3560 Rutherford Road, Unit 43. He's got some inside scoop on both markets. So if you specifically even have something that you want to sell right now, and you're looking to relinquish that property and sell it, give Andrew a call. He does specialize in that. I just want to say thank you, Andrew, for coming into the show today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll catch up to you on the next episode of Revealing Real Estate.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it, and thank you very much. And everything has been really great so far. You have a beautiful office, and we also have an amazing landlord. So.
Yeah, and we're going to be, I think our next one, we're going to be looking at some real good Florida opportunities. Absolutely. You're going to be bringing those to the table where we can start selling some Florida real estate markets. So stay tuned for all that, and you'll be going out to the broker community as well.
Let's go.
Offering commissions to realtors.
There you go.
That's it. Way to cooperate. Thanks, buddy.
All the best.
Thanks.
Looking to buy or sell? Call a team you can trust. Don't believe me? Our Google reviews say it all. Put us on your lawn, your house will be gone. TheOPteam.com.